Welcome to today's explainer. Today we're taking 60 million years of actual grounded paleohistory, and we're applying it to literally one of the most fascinating biological what-if scenarios imaginable. We're going to track a ghost through geological time. We'll look at the hard science of survival, climate, and evolution to see exactly what would happen if a prehistoric monster never actually left us. So, we're skipping the usual agenda today because we need to plunge straight into this scientific alternate history. What if the largest snake in history never died out? I mean, the fossil record tells us this massive predator went extinct millions of years ago when the world cooled down. But what if one isolated population managed to cling to existence in the deep, warm heart of the Amazon? To figure out what that creature would look like today, we first have to understand the terrifying reality of where it actually came from. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the rule of the giant snake. Picture this. 60 million years ago, the asteroid had just wiped out the dinosaurs, totally clearing out the top predators. And in the swampy, carbon dioxide-rich hothouse forests of what is now northern Colombia, well, mammals didn't take the throne. Not yet. The world was hot, it was wet, and perfectly designed for a whole new era of reptile dominance. Enter Titanoboa. 42 feet long, 1.5 tons, a body so incredibly thick you could barely fit it through a standard doorway. This was the undisputed apex predator of the tropics. And listen, this isn't just wild speculation built from a single bone fragment. Paleontologists have actually found the remains of nearly 30 individual massive snakes in a single Colombian coal mine in Sarajevo, including vertebrae the size of dinner plates. For 10 million years, it was literally the largest predator on the surface of the planet. To really wrap your head around the sheer absurd scale of this creature, we just have to look at today's heavyweights. I mean, modern anacondas are massive, right? But they are just a fraction of Titanoboa's size. For the entire first chapter of the Age of Mammals, mammals were just small, skittering creatures hiding in the brush. Reptiles completely dominated the food web, and Titanoboa sat at the very, very top of it, feeding on giant turtles and 20-foot crocodile relatives. So you're probably wondering, how did a creature this massive hunt? Well, it definitely wasn't chasing things down. It was a classic ambush predator. It used these incredibly sensitive infrared heat-sensing pits in its face to detect prey in complete darkness. And when it finally struck, it used constriction. We are talking about a constriction force of over 400 pounds per square inch. To put that into perspective, that is roughly the weight of an entire school bus pressing down on a single square inch of your body. It didn't just suffocate its prey. The pressure was so immense, so absolute, that it caused instant cardiac arrest. It could eat half a ton of meat in a single sitting, sustaining itself for months on end. But here's the catch. For all its terrifying power, Titanoboa had a fatal biological flaw. It was ectothermic, meaning it couldn't make its own body heat. Every single degree of warmth came from the environment around it. This meant Titanoboa was quite literally a biological thermometer. Its sheer size actually proves that the Paleocene tropics were running at average annual temperatures between 86 and 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Every inch of that 42-foot body was fueled by borrowed heat. And that made its existence incredibly fragile. Which brings us to Section 2, the Great Climate Crash. So what happens when the most extreme predator on Earth runs out of the one thing it absolutely cannot live without? Let's trace the timeline here. About 55 million years ago, the planet experienced this massive global warming spike called the PETM. For Titanoboa, this was an absolute golden age, pushing its metabolism and growth to its absolute peak. But then, the Earth's climate began to shift. Over 20 million years, global temperatures dropped, slowly squeezing the margins of Titanoboa's territory. And then, 34 million years ago, the Eocene-Oligocene transition hit. Global temperatures crashed violently by 5 degrees Celsius in a geological blink of an eye. The thermal window just slammed shut. And in the fossil record, Titanoboa simply vanishes. But what if it didn't? Section 3, Surviving the Cooling World. All right, here is where we pivot to our speculative evolutionary scenario. The highly acidic, biological soils of the Amazon basin are famously terrible for preserving fossils, but more importantly, while the rest of the world froze, the core of the Amazon never fully cooled. It just dropped from impossibly hot to merely very hot. So the thermal windows stayed just barely cracked open. If a population made it there, they'd face a 30 million year intense natural squeeze, essentially forcing them to adapt or die out entirely. We can break their survival down into a rule of 3. First, thermal tolerance. They'd need to adapt metabolically, right? Perhaps evolving slightly higher baseline metabolisms, a sort of partial warm-bloodedness that we've actually seen in other ancient marine snakes from that era, like Paleophis. Second, deeper specialization into environments where their immense size was an actual advantage. And third, evolving incredible behavioral complexity to survive brand new threats. To survive alongside new giant predators arriving in the Miocene epoch, our giant snake would have to carefully split the territory. Let's call it Neo-Titanoboa. It would likely claim the primary, warmest, and deepest flooded forests. Its infrared pits would become hypersensitive for hunting in murky, vegetation-choked waters, leaving the cooler, smaller tributaries to the emerging modern anacondas and the wide-open rivers to Purosaurus, which was a massive 40-foot caiman. And then, about 3 million years ago, the game changed entirely. The Isthmus of Panama closed, connecting North and South America in what's known as the Great American Biotic Interchange. Suddenly, this totally isolated ecosystem was flooded with fast, agile mammalian predators, like jaguars, which could threaten young snakes, alongside massive new prey like giant ground sloths and mastodons. This would have completely forced the snake to develop advanced behavioral problem-solving. It had to navigate three-dimensional flooded forests, track multiple prey species at once, and outsmart increasingly intelligent mammals coming down to drink at its rivers. Let's move to and see how this all builds up today. Section 4. The modern Titanoboa. After 60 million years of intense pressure and adaptation, what would this speculative modern leviathan actually look like today? Enter Titanoboa amazonica. Lurking in the most remote, unmapped rivers of the Amazon, where the canopy completely blocks out the sky and the water stays warm year-round, it wouldn't just exist, it would actively shape the entire physical landscape of the Amazon. A 40-foot predator sitting at the very top of the aquatic food web creates a massive landscape of fear. It would routinely prey on 15-foot apex black caimans, and because of its massive threat, prey animals like tapirs and capybaras would drastically change their behavior, totally altering where they graze to avoid the water's edge. This trophic cascade effect would fundamentally change the vegetation, the soil, and even the physical shape of the riverbanks themselves. But despite its absolute dominance, it would be incredibly rare. The energy requirements for a 40-foot, 1,000-kilo snake are enormous. Based on modern predator densities, there might only be 5,000 to 20,000 of them spread across the vast Amazon basin. To put that into perspective, that works out to roughly one snake per 135 square miles. Most people would go their entire lives without ever seeing one. But the indigenous peoples who lived alongside them for 15,000 years, they would know for sure. The ancient Yakumama legends of a giant water serpent wouldn't just be myths, they would be literal, practical survival rules passed down through generations, dictating exactly which rivers were safe and which meant certain death. Which brings us to our final point, Section 5, the cruel human irony. A creature that outlasted the asteroid, survived the freezing of the planet, and adapted through 60 million years of intense natural selection, is now facing an obstacle that moves far faster than evolution ever could. The specific, seasonally flooded forest habitats that a semi-aquatic giant absolutely requires to hunt are being systematically dismantled. Right now, there are over 400 dams planned or under construction in the Amazon basin, breaking the ancient flood pulses that the whole ecosystem relies on. Humans are logging chunks of the forest the size of Rhode Island every single year. This destroys the trees that pump moisture into the atmosphere, completely breaking the self-sustaining rain cycle. We are quite literally cutting away the lifeblood of the forest. And this reveals a deeply tragic irony. Recent 2025 research indicates that due to climate change, the Amazon basin is currently heading toward a hypertropical state. Average temperatures are rising and extreme heat events are becoming way more common. We are literally pushing the climate back toward the extreme Miocene-level heat that Titanoboa originally needed to thrive in. The heat is coming back, but we are simultaneously destroying the exact habitat it would need to survive in it. So we really have to ask ourselves, what does 60 million years of survival actually get you? It's a staggering paradox. You survive the fallout of a literal asteroid impact. You survive violently plunging ice ages. You survive massive new apex predators invading your territory. And you manage to hold on in the warm heart of the Amazon, only to be cornered by a species that has only existed for 300,000 years, moving with chainsaws and concrete faster than biology can ever follow. It leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful thought. The thermal window is opening while we're literally breaking down the door. We are running two massive experiments at once, warming the planet enough to theoretically allow giant ectotherms to exist again, while simultaneously bulldozing the only ecosystems that could possibly support them. Whether Titanoboa is still out there in some unmapped river, or whether it vanished 34 million years ago, its story forces us to look at the ancient, fragile balance of our world today. What ancient ecosystems are we dismantling right now, just as the climate shifts under our feet? That is definitely something to think about the next time you look at a modern rainforest. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I'll see you next time.